On March 8, 2014, the world was shaken by the sudden disappearance of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. This was a routine flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Became one of the greatest aviation mysteries in history. On March 8, 2014, Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 departed for Beijing. On board were 227 passengers, 10 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. At the controls was Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a 53-year-old veteran and one of the most experienced captains at Malaysian Airlines. On the other side is First Officer Fari Kamil. He's 27 years old. This is a training flight for him. After completing this training flight, he'll be fully certified to become a pilot. This flight takes off in the right direction for about 20 minutes, and at 1:08 p.m., this flight crosses the Malaysian coastline and goes over the South China Sea, in the direction of Vietnam. Zahari reports that the plane's level is at 35,000 feet. Everything is going normally. After about 11 minutes, as Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 approached Vietnamese airspace, Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control handed off the flight. Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Captain Zahari replied calmly. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
Everything sounds normal to hear, and it is normal up to this point. But the words of Captain Zahari were the last words that were heard from this airplane. After that, no sign of this flight was found. After only 30 seconds of Vietnamese airspace, the plane suddenly disappears from the radar. It was 1:21 p.m. The air traffic control of Kuala Lumpur did not notice it, and when they did, they thought that the plane had left the radar range and had gone into the Vietnam airspace. So, nothing unusual. Whereas the air traffic control in Vietnam, they saw that MH370 had come into their airspace. After only 30 seconds of Vietnamese airspace, the plane suddenly disappears from the radar. They try to communicate with the plane, but there's no response from the other side. After 18 minutes of repeated attempts, Vietnamese controllers tell Kuala Lumpur that the MS-370 has disappeared. In such situations, the Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center of Kuala Lumpur should have been notified within an hour that the plane has disappeared. But actually, 4 hours pass. Before an emergency response begins, it's 6:32 a.m. This was the time when the airplane should have landed in Beijing, but it didn't land. A search operation is called immediately. They tried to find the plane. If you look at the map, the plane was going from Malaysia to Beijing. Vietnam is in the middle and South China Sea is in the south, so it's obvious that the search operation was in the middle of South China Sea. To find this plane, this search operation is an international effort. 34 ships and 28 aircraft from 7 different countries try to find this plane the next morning, but the plane doesn't get any name or sign. Around 4 days later, on 12th of March, it is reported that the plane had disappeared from the civilian radar. But that night, a military radar spotted this plane. And the surprising thing is that according to this military radar, this plane was last seen at 2:22 p.m. And its location was not in the South China Sea. It was near the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It was in the west of Malaysia, in the Strait of Malacca. And according to the readings of this military radar, this plane was actually going in the direction of the Andaman Islands, the opposite direction of Beijing. Everyone is shocked to hear this news. Where did this plane go? Did it crash in the direction of India and crash in the Himalayas or Kazakhstan? A few days later, we get a new evidence: satellite data. It turns out that the plane was automatically trying to communicate with a satellite. This is a common thing. The big airplanes, like the Boeing 777, often try to communicate with the satellites to make their communication easier. It's like your phones automatically try to connect with known Wi-Fi. But the problem was that when the plane communicated with the satellite, it tried to log in. It tried to make a connection. No data was transmitted here of the plane's location. So the satellite only knew that this plane tried to communicate with me. But apart from that, he didn't know where this plane was actually. But some scientists and investigators thought, why not use this to estimate the location of this plane? They thought that when the satellite received that communication, the satellite would have turned in the direction of its antenna plane. So they measured the angle of the antenna of the satellite and calculated it to figure out where this plane could be. As I said earlier, we can't tell the exact location with the help of satellite, but we can estimate that the whole circle of white color can be at any point of the circle when the plane tried to communicate with the satellite. The plane tried to communicate with the satellite 7 times. That's why you can see 7 different circles of white color. They are called satellite handshakes. The time is written on each circle on which time the plane tried to communicate with it. And the last circle, the 7th circle, tells the latest time when the plane tried to communicate with the satellite, meaning the last point where the airplane would have gone. And it was very surprising because how big this circle is. From where to where it is reaching. From Kazakhstan to China, Indonesia, and Australia, passing through such a big ocean, this plane could be anywhere in this last circle, or it could be even further ahead. This is the last point where they tried to communicate. After this, investigators did some calculations after seeing the speed of the plane, after seeing how much fuel was left in the plane, and then estimated that the plane could be in this shaded area in this circle. It could be in this arc of the circle, which was famously named the 7th arc. The 7th arc is 2,000 kilometers west of Australia and occupies a very large area. It is in an area of the ocean where we don't know much. We never tried to go down there. In this map, you can see the satellite used to predict it. The yellow dotted circle on the outside is the range to which the plane could travel with its fuel. The flight time of 7 hours. And the red-colored curved arc you're seeing is the 7th arc, where it is assumed that the plane actually crashed. After this, many search operations were called. Yellow shaded regions show you where these search operations were conducted. And the orange area is the priority search area where the most search operations were conducted. The search operations on the sea that were going on until April 2014 were stopped because there was no benefit to it. The plane crashed and it must have drowned in the water. It must not be floating on the ocean. That's why the deep ocean search was conducted. At this point, the biggest and most expensive search operation in the world was conducted. For weeks, months, years, they kept searching for this plane but found nothing. After spending 3 years and $160 million, they shut down this operation. This operation was a failure. After that, Malaysian police started the investigation. They thought, why not check the background of the passengers in that plane, the pilots of the plane? Check their background and see what their history was. That it wasn't that someone tried to hijack the plane. After all these investigations, some theories came out. What exactly could have happened with this plane? Let's see what are the different theories being assumed one by one. Earlier, it was thought that if the plane disappeared from the radar, then how would it have happened? Either there must have been an electrical failure in the plane, an accident, or a technical failure in the plane because of which the equipment stopped working. Or a passenger or a pilot switched off the transponder. Did it on purpose. So the first theory is that Captain Zahari Shah is being picked up. It was said that the captain deliberately disabled the communication and took the plane to the ocean and crashed it. But what was the reason that he did it? Some people say that his mental balance was not good. Some people say that he was in a state of suicide. He wanted to commit suicide. Some people say that it was a hijacking. It was like a terror attack. But why is Zahari Shah being blamed here? There are some arguments that are raised in favor of this theory. The first point is that the 180-degree turn that the airplane took from Vietnam to Malaysia, this autopilot could not do it on its own. The pilot of the airplane would have done it on his own. The second point is that this airplane was actually flown in between the borders of Thailand and Malaysia, which is said to have been deliberately done. It was done on purpose, so that they can stay away from the radars of both the airspace. The third interesting point is that it was said that there was a flight simulator in Zahari Shah's house, which is not unusual, but he had drawn a path in that flight simulator. To play his game, the path actually coincidentally passed through the same path from where the MH370 actually went. Now you might think that this is definitely what happened, but actually the official in charge of the search operation, they have completely denied this theory. They said that this cannot happen because there are many arguments in the counter. First, he was a very experienced and seasoned pilot. Everyone respected him. He had no family problem, no economic problem, nor had he had any such past behavior. There is no reason to doubt them. If a pilot wanted to commit suicide, wanted to crash the whole plane, there should be a sign in his behavior or in his life. but there was nothing like that. So the second theory that is being picked up is that there were some other hijackers on the plane or some terrorists who actually did this. When this second theory was adopted, the plane had two suspects. First, Puriya Noor Mohammed Mehrad, and the second, Dilawar Saeed Mohammed Reza. These were two Iranian men, and they were suspected because they were traveling with fake passports. One had an Italian man's stolen passport. The other had an Austrian man's stolen passport. These two passports were stolen in Thailand. It is said that these two people were trying to settle in Europe by using these stolen passports. First, they took flights to Beijing. Then they were going to take flights from Beijing to Europe. Investigations said that one of them's mother was also present in Hamburg, Germany. She was waiting for her son. But in the end, this theory of terror was rejected because apart from these stolen passports, there was no other proof that they were actually terrorists. They actually wanted to settle in Europe by using a stolen passport. In fact, Interpol confirmed this by saying that they were probably not terrorists. There are different theories on this. Some people say that there must have been a fire in the cockpit, electrical fire, because of which many systems would have stopped working, including the transponder. Some people say that there must have been an accident, because of which the oxygen shortage suddenly occurred. Some people blame the hijackers here as well, that the hijackers must have tried to create a huge oxygen deficiency. Let's take a possible example to see what might have happened. A typical example of this theory is that as soon as the plane entered the Vietnamese airspace, the pilot noticed that the plane is malfunctioning. Something is wrong with the plane. So the pilot actually turned 180 degrees to take the plane back to Malaysia. And as the plane started flying back to Malaysia, suddenly there was a terrible accident due to which the oxygen was depleted. And all the people present in the plane fainted due to the lack of oxygen. Many systems stopped working and the plane continued to fly on autopilot. The military radar spotted the plane. Then the autopilot suddenly took a turn in the direction of the south, and it kept going down and down in the Indian Ocean, and it crashed 2,000 kilometers away from Australia. At the beginning, there were many theories about this plane, like the aliens must have made it disappear, or some US military must have shot down this plane, and they are trying to hide it. A drift analysis was conducted. Looking at the ocean current, if the plane had crashed in that area, then the different parts of the plane would have flowed with the ocean and gone to different places. And according to this drift analysis, some parts would have actually gone to Madagascar and the other islands nearby, which they have actually found. Till date, 27 pieces of the plane have already been found on different islands of the world. So maybe in the future, we'll get to know the secret of this mystery.